Shifts between past and present time frames. Time frames. A written essay or passage begins with a specific time frame. We often use a past time frame when we begin to tell a story. Read the example below. Note that the verbs here are all in the past tense. Also note that the writer uses the phrase 2 years ago, which indicates a past time frame. Past time frames. We often use the simple past plus the past perfect for past time frames. We can use the simple past to begin a story or set the scene. When telling a story, writers may also switch from the simple past to the past perfect. We can use the past perfect, had plus past participle, to describe an action or event that happened before the main events in the story. Here, the writer has switched to the past perfect to indicate something happened further in the past. Let's use a timeline to examine this example more closely. The first 4 verbs in the passage are in the simple past. We use the simple past with multiple verbs when they happen in a series, or one after the other. We can use the simple past to explain what happened first, second, third, and so on. Notice that when the writer wants to describe events that happened before the beginning of the story, she or he switches to the past perfect. Both of these events happened before the main action of the story. They help the reader understand the correct order of the events. Writers often use a present time frame when they are giving an opinion or stating facts. Read the example below. Both of the verbs that the writer uses are in the present tense, is and are. We often use the simple present tense in present time frames. We can use the simple present when we're writing about an opinion or wish to make an observation, as in these examples. Other times, we can use the simple present to give a fact or a description of an event that normally happens. Shifting from present to past. Sometimes writers shift time frames. They may start in the present tense and then shift to the past tense. In this example, the writer begins with an observation about some monkeys. This observation sets up the story the writer wants to tell about the time monkeys stole her or his food at a beach. Writers often use stories as evidence to support an opinion or observation in this way. Writers may shift from the past to the present, and they may then go back to the past. In this passage, the writer began to tell a story using the simple past. The story is about a time the writer visited Costa Rica with his or her family. The story begins with the simple past. Next, the writer gives a fact about Costa Rica, which serves as background information for the story. The tense switches to the present tense. When the story continues, the writer then switches back to the past tense. Writers often switch from the past to the present and back to the past like this when telling stories. We often want to insert a fact into our stories to make them more interesting and informative. Shifting time frames. Read the passage. Does the writer shift from the past to the present or the present to the past? In this passage, the writer begins with an observation about something her grandmother normally does, believes. Therefore, the writer uses the simple present. The text then shifts to the simple past, when the writer begins to tell a story about her childhood at her grandmother's house. Notice how the time clause, "when I stayed with her as a child," indicates that the writer has shifted to the past. Let's look at another example. Read the passage. Does the writer shift from the past to the present, or the present to the past? This passage begins with a story from the past, explaining the writer's days at her grandmother's house as a young person. Where does the writer shift from the past to the present? The shift occurs after the word today. Writers often use the words today or now to introduce a shift to the present. The verbs that follow this time word are then typically used in the present tense.